Mr. Riley is still entombed in traffic. But because he was not at the last meeting, he can't vote on the findings that we have to vote on tonight, so he couldn't vote. So we're going to go ahead. We have a quorum. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Annapolis. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Waldman.
Present.
Mr. Klein.
Present.
Mr. Sakunutis.
Present.
Mr. Cummings.
Present.
And we have Ms. Butler remote. I know she's.
Okay, so we have a quorum. On our agenda, there's really only one item, and that is to review and vote on the findings on 03323, which changed the time periods for special exception uses granted by the Board of Appeals. Have you all had a chance to look at the findings which were prepared by Mr. Cummings? There's, I believe, only one issue. And it's at the bottom of page 2, under decisions and conditions or recommendation. And there's a paragraph in there about a discussion and a vote that we had on changing the expiration dates. And so that's included. I think that Mr. Pline thinks that that should not be in. He can speak for himself. I think the only reason I think it should be in is to indicate, reflect that we had this discussion, we talked about that issue, and we voted on it, and that's what that is.
That's fair. It was more of a stylistic issue, so.
All right, and it's already prepared, and we can sign them tonight.
I'm good.
Great. All right. Do we have a motion to approve these findings?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, and with your approval, Ms. Butler, I'll sign your name. Okay, that's done. We also have minutes from the same date, 9/5. Have you all had a chance to read them? Any additions, corrections, suggestions, amendments, deletions, additions? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. And please note that Mr. Riley has arrived, looking rather harried. All right. So all in favor of approving those minutes from September the 5th? Mr. Riley was not present, so he will not vote tonight, which is fine. All right.
Aye.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. There being no other business to perform? No other business to perform. Now, what we're going to do is, in a moment, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. What we're going to do is we're going to step down. We'll probably rearrange ourselves around the table, and we're going to have a joint work session with the Historic Preservation Commission. There are a couple of members of that commission that might be on Zoom, and we have Ms. Butler from our commission on Zoom. And what we'll hear is a presentation primarily, if not only, on the Welcome Center building. And there will be the opportunity for members of the commission to ask questions and engage in discussion. And for those people who are present and wish to write questions, there's some index cards on the table near the doorway. Write your questions down and either pass them up or give them to Mr. Tower over here. And he'll pass them up to me, and I will ask the questions for you. Ordinarily, work sessions are not matter times for testimony, but this is a way for us to encourage and bring in thoughts and questions from the public so that it doesn't look like an insular and bordered proceeding. So with that in mind, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second? Second. All right, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 All right, the fastest meeting on record.
Aye.
Is it in there?
I'm delighted that you're here to pick up on this important information. This is probably the best place to get it on what's going on. This is a joint work session between the Planning Commission and the HPC. Several people are present, what do they call it, remotely, virtually? Independently. There will be a presentation by the design team, and there'll be a time for questions. And there are, if anybody in the audience wants to propose written questions, we'll be more than happy to entertain them. This meeting has been scheduled for nigh on 3 weeks, and we've been able to get a very good representation from both of the commissions, so I think that there was adequate public notice. All right, with that being said, I will hand this over to the inimitable Miss Eileen Fogarty.
Well, thank you very much. We are delighted to be here. And I handed out a fact sheet to the commissioners. What we'll do, I put it up on the seats up there. We'll give that to everyone. We have with us this evening this incredible team, starting with our Public Works Director, Burr Vogel, from Traceries, which is a nationally recognized preservation firm, Kim Dayleder. We have from Mahan Reichel, our chief landscape architect, Scott Reichel. And we have from BCT Design Group, Bryce Turner, who is the architect for the project. So with that, when I was going to introduce Harry, but Harry has already been introduced, and we're delighted that he's here with us. What we'd like to do this evening, mainly, we are here to hear your comments, your questions, and your direction. We'd like to share with you the evolution of this project, which is not just the Welcome Center, but it's the Welcome Center, Burtis House, and the Prince George Street Park, all of which is called Phase 2 of the City Dock Resiliency Project. We'd like to share how the project meets the Historic District guidelines, the approval we received, the conceptual approval from Maryland Historic Trust, and the new site plan, which Travis Ligone and Rob Thuma are online, and they will virtually be sharing the new site plan at the end. So with that said, let me make sure we have all of this. Both the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning Commission this past spring approved the site plan, again, Phase 1 for the City Dock Resiliency Project. This past week, the Historic Preservation Commission approved the amended site plan, which involved the pergola stage, the electrical utility building, the interactive fountain. So now the entire Phase 1 of the site plan and all of its amendments have been approved by our boards and commissions. I think many of you have asked questions about the funding and the cost of the project. The project is a $72.1 million project. That includes the Welcome Center. It includes all of Phase 1 and Phase 2. 94.1% of the project is funded. The funding comes from a variety of sources, federal earmarks, FEMA. We also have the money, the $24 million from the concession payment generated from the Hillman Garage. The Welcome Center itself is an $8.6 million project. So that is, and we are very, very pleased to be in the situation we are, to have 94% of the funding lined up before we start construction. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Bryce Turner to talk about the evolution and the details and hopefully answer all of your questions.
Thank you, Eileen. Good to see you all again. Feels like we've done this before, but we do have some new things to share, absolutely. we're really very excited about a number of things, which I'll get into tonight. This image that is up here was a watercolor done by a good friend of mine in Easton, actually, Stuart White, who Scott knows. And but this was done, it was commissioned, I guess Historic Annapolis really commissioned this as we were coming out of the Action Committee. And I think it really helped to create a lot of excitement about City Dock and the green space that was available there and kind of what we could do and the idea that you really could get rid of a lot of that parking. And so we put this in there just to kind of harken back to that moment in time. We knew then that we needed a world-class landscape architect to help us make the space something more than what the mayor called a soccer field. And sure enough, we did, and we were fortunate to do that by getting Mahan Reichel on board. So we just wanted to put this in first. And next, the City Dock Action Committee was an incredibly positive experience. A lot of great things, came out of that. In the report, this is a bit of a summary of some of that. But that the Bertus Basin, we're calling that area adjacent to Bertus, would be a new center for water-related uses, commercial, recreational, and educational. And these were some of the things we really heard a lot. It was all about water access, Chesapeake Bay environmental education. I can't tell you how many times, even in this room, that was pointed out to me that was a really important thing to do for young people and adults. Provide direct and easy access to the water. The idea of being able to, dip your toe into the water was very big, all the way from the start of the ULI program to what we heard in the Action Committee, not just for yachts, but for others, and that there could be kayaks, small boats, and other types of access, paddle boards. Celebrating the maritime history, the past and present, was obviously a big part of that. Living classrooms for maritime education and to educate all ages on the diverse and accessible programs that could happen here at City Dock because of its diverse history. Next slide. So that was some of the positivity came out of the Action Committee, obviously. And, I hate to start with kind of a negative slide, but this is what it is. This is what we've got today. And that's the current Harbor Master location. And we wanted to think a little bit about we just want to walk you through our process. How do we decide where we're going to locate all these types of things that have been requested? And the Harbor Master building there, were it not for the fact that it has an asphalt parking lot all around it, this would be a really bad location. Given the fact that there is a parking lot there, it really kind of doesn't matter. It almost looks like it's an oasis in the middle of this parking lot. And there is even a little bit of an outdoor courtyard there, but the fact of the matter is it's such a inhospitable space with all the parking and no shade around it that it really doesn't get used really very well. Next slide. So these are some of the images of the Harbor Master. We've spent obviously a lot of time there in the last 5 years. This building is brick. It is tall. It's right up against the historic guidelines in terms of its height. It's monolithic. It's massive in some ways. It feels very solid and not terribly friendly, quite frankly. But that's just the nature of maybe when it was built and the fact of where it was put and where it was sited. There's a visitor's information kiosk there, obviously relatively small. Next slide. So the interior is just about as bad. And, we have concrete block stall dividers in the bathrooms. And, look, it's just showing its age for sure. And we all know that. Next slide. So some of the challenges with that existing Harbor Master building is the public amenities are inadequate. The existing location is not really on the water. It's not that close to the water. It could be closer to Susan Campbell Park, obviously, and Bertus, and be able to look out over at least maybe Spa Creek as well as Ego Alley just as well. The current space does not really accommodate programming or educational activities, for various reasons that I mentioned. The building blocks views because of that location, and it's just uninviting outdoor space. Next slide. We can't help but think about some of the other facilities you see up and down the East Coast. And, we could have picked most any waterfront city on the East Coast. This happens to be Newport and Plymouth, Massachusetts, Rock Hall, Maryland, and it's actually a private facility, but it's an example of what is happening in some other places. They tend to be, sizable buildings that have a lot of the amenities that you need for these types of destinations for boaters. And a lot of it is facilities and bathrooms and that type of thing, obviously. The interiors are also relatively nice. They tend to be open, airy, contemporary, and usable and desirable places to go in and to linger and attractive. Next slide. So transforming our waterfront, so what do we do? How do we get there now that we know some of the criteria? So we started with the action committee. This was my design subcommittee, which included Jay and Chris Shine and Michael Dowling and Craig Martin, Jay Schwartz, Jay Graham, Michael Beatty, who was involved. And we had a lot of meetings, dozens of meetings really. And it's like, okay, so what's going to be really important for this design and placemaking? And we hosted others who would sit at our table and talk about these things. Next slide. So we knew that history was a big part of this. And this is obviously a historic view from the 1920s, I believe, of City Dock. And you can see Burtis in the background there. And of course, Dock Street was a double-loaded corridor then, a true street, rather than the one-sided corridor it is now with a big parking lot. And then, of course, the seafood industrial buildings. Next slide. The other waterfront uses that were happening in that zone, in that district, were the ferries. And there was a ferry at the Naval Academy. This is the Claiborne to Annapolis ferry. So this went to the Eastern Shore. And those types of uses happened. I think none of us would want a car ferry there today. Pedestrian ferry maybe has been thought about and dreamed about, which would be fantastic to be able to land right in the heart of Annapolis if you could come by foot on a boat. Next slide. And then even the historic Annapolis Yacht Club, which this was not the building that burned in most recent history, but before that, I'm told, and appears to be it, as you can see Ego Alley in the distance there in the Capitol, with its double shed roof in front of it, which I'll refer to later. Next slide. So, we have those types of waterfront issues or waterfront needs, I'll say. And of course, form follows functions for these types of structures. So the location that we're suggesting and have proposed and talked about is right next to the field house there at the foot of Prince George Street, where the circle is in the image. And the requirements we have there, we've got to accommodate the harbor master. We've got other maritime functions happening there with paddle boards and kayaks. We know we have to have public restrooms, boater facilities, including showers for the boaters who visit Annapolis, and educational space. Next slide. So just drilling in a little bit further, this is the building that we've been crafting and sculpting right on the water's edge there, adjacent to Burtis, and proximity to the water. The harbor master has to manage the harbor. They do need to see the water as much as possible. Cameras do a lot, and they're used to working with cameras, but we think there's more that they can do there. Boater safety programs, education, environmental classes, we've talked about, and then water-dependent activities like a ferry, which would be fantastic here, and boating activities. And the opportunity, perhaps most importantly, is to activate this Burtis House historic resource that otherwise will just sit there and rot. If we can't find a way to get people into it and get people to the second level and somehow bring it into into the public fold. Next slide. So in addition to all those requirements that we have and the criteria for design of the design problem, of course, we also have to understand the historic design guidelines, which for this site are relatively tight, of course, being in the middle of the historic district. We're at 22 feet to the cornice, measured, of course, from the outside grade of the building, and 32 feet to the ridge of the building. There are also a lot of bulk and mass requirements there that the HPC is more familiar with than I am, and especially with facade width and how often you have to break up the facade in order to create that kind of diverse, built over time feeling that, you know, is unique to the streetscape of Annapolis and most historic towns. Materials being obviously very important here too. Next slide. So in addition to that criteria, we tried very hard to listen to the community. We had over 100 meetings in these 5 years. It's a little hard to believe. Now that includes some of these council meetings as well. But it's a lot, and we heard a lot, and you know, if you listen to enough people, you'll hear just about anything that you want. and obviously you have to distill from that and use professional judgment in order to go forward. Next slide. Some of the there were a lot of early studies that were done. Some were done before we were even commissioned to do a Maritime Welcome Center or a Harbor Master building, but this building on the left was actually part of the RFP that AMRP submitted to the city without having had that input. The image to the right was Michael Dowling's design work that was published as part of the Burtis House feasibility study, which we thought was interesting, locating it next to Burtis and making it feel like a diverse structure, like it was part of that industrial world of City Dock. Next slide. Some other studies that we did, again, before we really were even commissioned, we were trying to test the waters and see what could be done here. We tried some things that we had explored in Savannah, Georgia, and had gotten some ideas that, you know, we were trying to think about what would something like that, what does it mean to do a building like that in Annapolis? And of course, we felt it needed a shed roof, but we realized that that created some challenges for us too, because we also needed some height in this building in order to make it a modern functioning building. Next slide. So we started playing with the site plan here a little bit. And this really, sometimes, you know, when you're designing, you change scale, you change perspective, and it can really help give you another view as to how you solve the design problem. And we began looking at a double shed structure. And the double shed roof structure really helped us from a volumetric perspective to reduce the scale of it a bit and to be able to break it up a little bit so it felt more diverse, more like Annapolis in terms of its scale, and it also provided a lighter touch to the Burtis House. Next. So, you know, we developed this design, which I think you're familiar with and you've seen. It's a double shed roof. There's a glass hyphen between Burtis and the first shed roof. Those two shed buildings are skewed from one another to provide more intensity. This is kind of an important thing that came out of the design subcommittee that I felt very fortunate to have the input of a lot of other great architects here in town. And the deck kind of connecting all of that. But, you know, we rotated the building, as I'll talk about in a few minutes, which provided more of a waterfront experience here and allowed us to address the water in a better way. And of course, continue to incorporate all these things that we talked about. And the fact that the public should have access to the second level of this building on the deck. And that should be public access area so that you can watch the Wednesday night races from up there. Next slide. So there were a number of things that we heard as well from the community. One is, well, could you make the building a little smaller? You know, you've got a couple extra uses in here perhaps. And so we did. And we reduced the size of the building by about 580 square feet, which is significant on a small building, and that's the above ground square footage. It was a total of about 1,100 square feet on all 3 levels. And we ended up with a building that's 4,523 square feet above ground to replace a Harbor Master building that's about 3,160 square feet. So yes, it is a little bigger, but it's also a better building, and it's doing a few more things. The other feedback that we got that was very interesting, and I really listened, and at first I wasn't sure about this, was that the building should address the water more. Maybe it should address the water more than it does town. So we rotated the 2 shed roofs 90 degrees, did a number of other manipulations, obviously, to make it feel right on the site. And a couple of interesting things came out of that. You know, one was it addressed the water for sure, but it also kind of put the front door at the end of Dock Street in a way that made it fairly obvious where the entrance is, and created a transparent kind of a volume that, you know, you can really see through to some extent, and you'll get light coming through there to a certain extent, to the extent that buildings can do that with glass. The new orientation, we think, had a lot of advantages. The Harbor Master also, we added a crow's nest, what we called, which was really a part of the deck that simply provided access, outdoor access for the Harbor Master, so they could get right outside on the corner of the deck and see what's going on Ego Alley and Spa Creek. Next slide. So this is obviously an elevation drawing, the type that we have to submit to the Maryland Historic Trust and to the HPC and everyone through the process. It really shows, and of course you never see a building this way really, but architects have always designed this way, but it's helpful in understanding relationships of volumes and geometry. It shows our heights and how our height is measured from the adjacent ground plane, which is about 6.5 feet above sea level, which allows us to stay under the 32-foot height restriction. And the cornice line is our tightest spot. It's right at it, really. It's very close to 22 feet above our 6.5-foot grade plane. You can see how it ties into Burtis here again with that glass hyphen, as we call it. And then there's another hyphen that's a little more solid in between these 2 shed roofs. Next slide. So this is an image looking at it from the kind of from the south in Spa Creek. You certainly notice here the 2 shifting volumes and the deck that connects them. You know, we're very pleased with the way that this is working out. Next slide. So then it was time to go see the Maryland Historic Trust, really, and to make an application for the Historic Trust because they have an easement on the property, and we were literally building with the easement up against Burtis. So this is a materials elevation that says which materials we're using, which of course it's a lot of wood. We're not really introducing brick here. We've got a little bit of stone. We've got obviously glass and metal for our framing systems. It's also going to be a very environmentally friendly building I'll talk about in a few minutes. Next slide. And we showed Maryland Historic Trust these materials, the red cedar shingles, the different types of wood siding that we have here. We have one that's kind of dark and it's flamed and has a lot of kind of weight to it, which we really like, as well as tile that we're using. Next slide. So the Maryland Historic Trust approved our concept, which we're very excited about, I have to tell you. We listened to what they had said. They thanked us for that, and I'll share with you some of the changes we made for them on these next couple of slides. But again, we think that this volumetric approach with the two shed roofs really helped us to lightly touch Burtis. And that was something that they, reiterated. And obviously, we were trying to do as well. But we talked about how we can do that, possibly even with a glass roof on this glass hyphen between the two buildings. And I think you'll see why in a few minutes, why that seems to make some sense. So they liked that approach. They liked the fact that the Burtis House would be activated. They liked the fact that this addition to Burtis, if you will, is on the rear of Burtis. It's not the historic facade of Burtis, which is the one that faces Prince George Street. So I'm going to ask Kim to talk a little bit more about some of this discussion we had with Maryland Historic Trust.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a clarification question? Of course. Do you know can you tell us the square footage of the interior of Burtis House? And compare it, thank you.
It's approximately 850 square feet per floor.
Okay, so 1,700 square feet.
Right.
Thank you.
Kim, I guess you'd like to mark.
Thank you very much. So we had a committee staff level meeting where we just informally discussed the project with MHT before formally submitting for their easement approval. And they had some very constructive criticism and favorable things to say. One of the things was we were originally going to have the secondary egress out of the second floor of Burtis House coming out of the window, the two windows on the left side there with the deck wrapping around and a stair a little bit more close to Burtis House. And they asked us to try and concentrate all of the impacts to the historic resource to one elevation, which is the rear, that has been most impacted. So you can see on this slide, this was the initial concept where we were dropping a window, a non-historic window, to a door, and the stair would lead down. And they said, is there any way that we can really keep three of these elevations as intact as possible? Obviously, they're not completely intact. There's a non-contributing porch on this elevation right now. But with that opportunity, we can restore it back to what it was within a period of significance. So we did do that. We pulled back the deck. We concentrated all changes that aren't restoring things, but all changes to the rear of the building. The secondary egress is at the rear, and we're limiting the impact of the hyphen. So we made the hyphen as light as possible. You can see here, this is a view, a section cut through the hyphen. So obviously the basement of the Maritime Welcome Center is larger, but this is cutting right through. We're utilizing a window on the interior. Underneath that slab that the woman is walking on the second floor, is where all of the mechanical equipment will come through. The roof is slanted, not only for drainage, but to fit between the cornice and the trim of all of the windows, so we won't impact that. Currently, this has a non-contributing addition on the rear, and so we're going to try and restore it to the best that we possibly can with John Tower's help. And so this is what it will look like inside of that hyphen. We wanted it to be very, very glassy to experience as much as possible Burtis in 3D. The stair is pulled away, the windows will be restored on the rear, the siding will be restored on the rear, and really the only impacts are dropping two of those windows on the second floor to egress levels, one from the elevator and one as a secondary egress out for emergencies.
Okay, thanks, Kim. So we also just wanted to make sure, this is something we haven't really talked about, but I know that Whiting Turner is excited about and the whole design team is the environmental progress that we plan to make with this building in terms of making it as green as possible. We don't really have a target yet for LEED Platinum or LEED Gold, but that's kind of beside the point. The fact is it should be a very green building. So we want to use geothermal heating and cooling, which will really help us from not having air conditioning and heating and condensers on top of the roof, which is hard to do on such a small building. We'll have lots of natural light, which is great for health and energy in terms of lighting. But of course, in terms of heat gain, you have to be very careful with that. And so we've studied how we can shade these windows as well with a couple different, shading devices on the inside. Stairs, we've got several stairs are actually required for this building. We've tried to make them open so that they're very accessible and they'll be used by people. And, you get a little bit of exercise walking up and down stairs, not a bad thing. The elevators are there if you need it. But in terms of health and wellness for buildings, to me, it's a very important function. So we're excited about this piece of it. And we're trying to source these materials as close to Annapolis as we can. Next slide. So one kind of, just a couple more concepts here I wanted to get across. One is, I think some people have trouble understanding, I know we all do, really, the scale of buildings until you actually see it in its context. And, it's like, is the Harbor Master building today as big as the Maritime Welcome Center? And so we wanted to do a one-to-one comparison because we hadn't really looked at it that way before. This is a little model we built of the Harbor Master building. And this next slide is kind of a comparison of the two. And you see that they're really exactly the same height because they're built right up to the historic guideline heights, I'm sure. This is an elevation drawing on the top row there of the Maritime Welcome Center on the right. So where the roof gets lighter, of course, it's angled back. And you can see where the roof of the Harbor Master building is angled back. So, we stay within that 32 feet above grade on the ridge. And of course, the cornice at 22 feet. So the width of the building and the mass of the building, I would say they're very similar. When you turn and have a longitudinal view of it, you see the Harbor Master building there on the right, on the bottom, which is its width. And then next to that, of course, the new Maritime Welcome Center and Burtis next to it. So, it's not overwhelming in terms of the size differential between these buildings. As we said, it is somewhat larger, 1,000 or so square feet larger. But I thought that was an important study so that people could get a sense of the difference in the buildings. The other thing that jumps out to me is the transparency of a building with a lot more glass. And while you don't always just see through buildings like, a stack of cards, you do get a better sense of transparency, and you do see sunsets and sunrises through these types of spaces, and it certainly feels a lot better, we think, and is a lot more welcoming. So that was a study that we wanted to do that I know you haven't seen before. Next slide. So this is a view of the Maritime Welcome Center again, next to Burtis, with the stairway and the deck kind of reconfigured as the Historical Trust had requested. And, you get to see a good facade of Burtis. And of course, when you go around the building, you see a lot more of it. So in the next couple of slides, we can talk about the Prince George Park, and Scott's going to address that.
Thanks, Bryce. Is the glass that you're proposing non-reflective?
It is non-reflective. It's, double insulated, what's called low E glass, I think is what it will end up being. But it's not any kind of a metallic reflective, no. We want it to be as clear as possible, of course, but they'll have some tint.
How do you stop birds from flying into it?
We'll have etchings on the glass. That's important. Yeah, I failed to mention that before. I think we may have talked about it before, but that's important.
So whack into it.
Yeah.
So this was their first concept for Prince George Park. As you know, Burtis House is being raised, so we do have quite a grade to make up at the end of Prince George Street, because you know how low Prince George Street is and where all the water sets. So we're coming up to that. So we created that broad stair that got you up to Prince George Park. We're really trying to create a pocket park here. There were some restrictions, or I should say, civil, infrastructure things. You see that red line is a water line that we had to stay away from because we were originally pushing back, so we had to pull back off of that. Also, the U.S. Navy has, they want you to stay 10 feet off of their wall for any large trees. So that tree is just outside that 10-foot line. You can see there's sort of the ghosted tree. We've created a large platform bench there that you could sit and have lunch on and sit around. They're better than benches because more people can get up there. But basically, it's a plaza at the top there that now is the new grade. And this is to be able to support small groups gathering, tour groups, kids, and just be a nice pocket park as a respite that's not as busy as the other parks because you're on the other side of the dock street. I should also mention that is a seat wall off the U.S. Navy wall. So that entire white line that you see around the tree is all 18 inches. So it's a great, there's a lot of seating in this smaller park. Then we step down again to get to the water level, and the stairs are on the lower part, and then there's sort of stadium stairs on the upper part. So that you see that division halfway through. Those are 18-inch drops on the upper part, so that you could sit there and watch races, watch kayaks go out. The other one is more utilitarian to get people up and down the steps. And then we put the ADA accessibility against the U.S. Navy wall, so you'll be able to circle up and get through there. I should also note that there's another ADA ramp on the Prince George Street side that you can see runs up through that alleyway there. And that alleyway is also ADA accessible that connects, because that's low, connecting up to Dock Street. Excellent. So this is a view. So you can see to the right are the stadium stairs, which is basically a nice gathering spot. Then you see the staircase going up, and you see the tree just out of the view, but you can see the crown of it. And then you can see the kayak storage area that's right there. It's kind of behind the bike there. And then the boardwalk that connects all the way to City Dock Park. And this is an aerial view. So it's evolved since that first concept, in that we felt that stair was almost too monumental for the end of Prince George Street Park, so we broke it up with a planter in the center. So you got planting on the Navy wall side, you got a planter in the center to pick up the grade. We've got a planter sort of helping hide the ADA accessibility there along the alleyway. We've got that tree sitting up in that raised bench area. And then we're talking about an inset of paving, and the sculpture is just shown as it's a placeholder that we could do sculpture there. And that'll probably be something that comes out of the Legacy Committee, that what that could be. And this is a view just looking from the Navy wall side back, so you can see that seawall that I was talking about, and then that piece of sculpture that we're just showing an anchor, for lack of better imagination, for the Prince George Street Park. But then you can see Burtis House and the porch that's there now. That's not historic, but will remain. And then the accessibility is on the left side to get up further, to avoid the steps at the porch.
Well, thanks.
Sure.
So where is the metal fence that's there now? Is that still there? Does that metal fence that has evergreen trees all along it, does that get moved?
That is the Navy wall fence. That's going to be a wall, is my understanding. They're working on that right now as part of their resiliency plan.
So that becomes,
I showed you that design.
yeah,
It's going to be brick.
so that becomes a brick wall, and then this, where is that wall in your plan? Is it to
It's to the,
the left of all those plantings?
yes, the plantings are in front of that wall.
Okay. And currently, the Burtis House, if I'm remembering it right, is sort of where all the stair floods now, right?
Yes.
All this water sits in front.
Right.
So are you cutting out some of Prince George Street? The actual street? Are you moving this park?
Prince George Street does become
Shorter, yeah,
Yeah, so it's,
slightly.
you know, where in front of those steps is actually asphalt street to
Right now.
or even further.
Yeah, you're right.
And so it does get smaller. Some emergency vehicles, not fire trucks, but an ambulance can go through between Latitude 38 and Maritime Welcome Center. I think we still have that access, yeah.
Yeah,
And
Yeah, very different.
looking at Burr here too. Yeah, but it will be not available for cars.
So right now, there's sort of an empty lot that the city cars
Yes.
park.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
will be still
That's-
open for emergency vehicles there?
yes. It's now, it's more,
That's what this,
It's pedestrian.
it's now becoming more of an alleyway.
but it's still wide enough?
Yeah, yeah.
Should it be
It's-
needed?
That's right where that walkway is there. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be the cut through. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and Prince George Street down at this end stays one way?
Yes, is my understanding. Well, I think it's to be determined, it's two ways.
Right.
Because you come down to the,
Right, you loop
then
around.
you turn around, yeah.
So does that remain? The street is just shorter?
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
where the
Okay.
deliveries would come in.
yeah,
The rest
come
of
there
it's
and
right.
be able to, they have to do a 3-point turn to go back out
Okay.
to
But they would not be
Latitude.
using this emergency access deliveries?
No,
It would be for emergency
Right.
vehicles? Okay. Is there any, and this may be slightly off topic, but, you know, now there's memorial benches there, and there's some references to what it was historically, and there's a Hell Point. Will any of those things remain to give it sort of some history of what it was?
we have an inventory of what's there, and we are, and that literally goes for all the way from Donner Park all the way over, all the plaques.
Yeah.
And we're in the middle of trying to figure out where they'll either be replicated or they'll be replaced. I mean, replaced
somewhere else,
with the
or-
same, yeah, they might move. It depends what they say.
Mm-hmm.
If they're referencing the place, they'll stay there, obviously. But if it's a donated bench and we can move it and mark another bench, we'll do that.
Okay.
But the idea is to keep all the references somewhere. I mean, just to say that, we run into these things all the time. And one of the things that I think the city needs to do is say, you can't, we call it plaque attack, because everybody wants to put a tree in and put their father's name on it or their mom's name on it. And then every tree's got a plaque. And so we try and consolidate them in projects, like donor walls at hospitals, for example, rather than have everything plaqued. There's one big place where all the names are. And that's what we'd like to try and do here, is also consolidate the donated things as well.
I mean, some places, as you know, use bricks in sidewalks.
Yes.
Or something like that, but I think there's certainly meaningful things that
Yeah.
people, it makes you
100
feel
100%,
part of
yeah.
Annapolis to have those things, so yeah,
Yeah,
we don't want
yeah.
them gone.
Exactly.
Okay.
Go back.
Well-known shade is a big
Important.
issue, right? We want to get rid of parking and we want to create more shade.
Right.
So in the middle between those two steps, which are going to get very hot in the sun, you think that it's going to be deep enough and big enough as a receptacle to plant a tree there also?
We could, sure. We could, a small tree. I wouldn't do
Something like
an oak. You could do.
No,
yeah.
bigger than that, but something that will shade.
Well, you could do like a,
Birch or something? I don't know.
no, the maple, the magnolia, the Virginia magnolia, the sweet bay magnolia would be a good, good option there. Blooms in summer.
Something to shed some shade
yeah.
over those stairs.
Yeah.
Rather
It's
than
a-
just more
it's a great idea.
wild grasses. Okay.
Yeah.
And you said that
Nice
the,
scent.
Yeah.
and you said that the alleyway is
Yes.
big enough for like an ambulance, but not for a fire truck?
It can't, the civil's not here, but as I remember, it cannot take a ladder truck for sure. It's got to be it's turning radii.
Can't make,
At this corner or the,
it's been a little while, but I think it's the other side.
on the other side? Yeah.
But you can meet the requirements of fire protection.
Yes.
What's the fire
The
department?
volume and the, yeah.
What's the fire department say?
They'd love to be able to not have to back out, but we just couldn't make it work. So they have to come down for a response, they'll have to back out. And they can do that, it's not ideal, but.
Which is not really that unusual in the city statute.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, as long as you're comfortable with it, that,
Yeah, they had a lot of impact on our trees and tree spacing in the City Dock Park. Especially, they weighed in heavily.
Right. On the spacing, so they get a ladder between the trees and where the trees went. So we actually reduced the number of trees along the building facade there.
what might be put into place to say to other people, delivery trucks, cars, taxis, that you're not to go down that lane?
Bollards.
But then you need to pick up the bollard if there's an emergency, right?
Yeah, usually there's two ways. Yeah, emergency, they usually have the key. There's electric ones that drop. They're really expensive. I don't think the city has that. We don't have that in the budget. But usually they all have like a master key that unlocks them and they just fall down, drop down. They sink down. They have two handles on them. You pull them up.
Okay. I mean, you know what I mean? You know how people are. Okay, I think that's just a little bit of a thing, because we so much want to protect the other side, and that tremendous esplanade that we're creating on the other side. I mean, it's really going to be nice. So the entrance underneath the red roof of Berta's house is also an entrance? Is that how people can enter there also, or no?
I have a feeling that's going to be closed. But it could be. It's not accessible, of course, from an ADA perspective. But I don't think we're counting on it as an egress either.
Okay, but who's going to run the Berta's house?
Well, now you're asking some of those hard questions. The harbor master is going to have the second floor of the entire, both buildings. And I think the ground floor there's still some question.
Well, I think there's a lot of discussion and a lot of interest. The Cultural Legacy Group certainly has interest in having displays there. So there's no shortage of interest in terms of management of the building itself. It will be the harbor master.
Does the harbor master have the same authority over current building?
Over the current harbor master building?
Is it harbor master or public works?
The harbor master operates it. Public Works, the crews that do the cleanup work have a small office and storage area.
So what will be on the first floor of Berta's house? We don't know yet?
Well, there's going to be, it appears there's going to be museum space, but you have several different interests all coming together for that space.
So we're not sure yet.
Correct.
But we have a lot of options.
Not determined yet.
Yes.
And just only because you're new to the commission, we have no authority on this commission for what they put inside.
Put inside it.
I'm just asking that as a resident and an interested citizen.
There is a point at which we have to consider whether we're speaking for ourselves.
No, that was a joke.
Well, I'm just,
And that plaza, I mean, what's the point of making it concrete?
Oh, I don't think that's, I think that might be the paver. We don't see that as concrete, yeah, the pavers that we're using on Dock Street Park as well. It's a really nice looking granite it's not a granite paver, but it's a concrete paver that looks like granite. They do granite fines in the pavers. They're really quite convincing, actually.
Has there been interest in a sculpture of some sort of public art?
Yeah, we've been approached by the
You think it's
Arts Council. Yeah.
Do you think it's a better idea to leave that possibility leave it open for that possibility, or to put another tree there?
We've talked with the public art people very briefly about the area on the city dock that is the furthest, most northeastern point, about having, in the early images, Scott got away with himself and he had this pinwheel up there that everybody commented on. Remember that? So that will be a public art, and that's what we, yes, Scott can tell you what it was.
Kinetic. It's kinetic sculpture.
Oh, God.
It's probably.
After he got picked on, he said, I'm just putting an anchor.
That's right.
Right.
A piece of public art.
I think that would be great.
I don't think that we would, if we did a second tree, I wouldn't put it dead center on the building. To me, the view of the building is kind of important as a historic structure. So if we did a second tree, I might extend that stair planter up and put it at the top of the stair maybe, and so and frame it.
Frame it.
But I definitely wouldn't put it in the center.
That's okay. It's okay. Just asking to see, explore whatever options.
It's a good point, and I'm not one of the biggest champions of the Burris House, but I think you're right to keep that view, because that really makes it much more, has much more impact than it does as the structure that it always has been.
Right.
Can I take us back out? We're getting into the minutiae of like sculptures and stuff, which we tend to do in these meetings. That's not the conversations I have with my constituents or people ask me questions about this. Phase 2 is far more, I don't want to say controversial, but at least discussed than phase 1. Everybody wants to mitigate the flood problems that we have. This is a very controversial, you guys have had a lot of feedback. I guess my question might be to you, Bryce. Like, what do you think is the number one concern that you've heard from the community relative to the plans that you've built and rebuilt and kind of you continue to adjust? And here you are again, kind of doing the same thing. So I'm just curious, what do you think the top concern or the top 2 concerns have been that you're now addressing that perhaps the rest of us could articulate back to our constituents or back to the community to say, actually, they're adjusting yet again to accommodate for your concerns?
Well, it's interesting. I do not get comments made directly to me very often with these. It's very interesting, but I hear about it secondhand, and especially. But I would say that what I did hear was, it's any way you can just make the building a little smaller, and that's what we did. And there was a concern about the building addressing the water, and that's what we did. I think as we rotated it 90 degrees, I'm not getting a lot of feedback. I'm getting just as much feedback that we need a world-class, and some people say iconic building here if we're going to bother building anything. This building's not meant to be one that shouts or that's iconic. It's meant to be one that fits in and serves a need and is appropriate for the space. So I'm not getting a lot of that. I feel like we already got some of that. I think people are hesitant to change, and I think this is an example of that.
Following up on the comment you made about the size of the building, so just so I can get it straight in my head. When you say you reduce the size, what dimensions are different than what we've seen in the past? You know, with the two separate shed roofs, like, is it a little shorter? Is it a little narrow? I mean, when you say, where did the 800 square feet come from? I guess is what I'm curious about.
When the building, when the two shed roofs were rotated the other direction, 90 degrees, the building was bigger. Once we rotated this way, it has not changed to speak of in terms of its size. At least not. Yeah.
The two pieces of the building that are oriented the way they are now is basically the same thing that we saw last time in terms of size.
Yes.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me. I thought it was reduced.
No, when we turned it, we also reduced it.
Okay, so it's
580
two generations
square feet.
ago, not.
Two revisions ago, it
Okay.
was oriented the other way,
Yeah.
and each of the shed sections were equal length. So it was a little, overall, a little longer, and probably also a little older.
Just the way you were talking about it made it sound like in this orientation was reduced, but not. Okay.
No, it wasn't. No, I didn't mean to imply that.
Can I ask another couple of questions? So are you going to get to more details of the Welcome Center? I don't know where you are in the presentation. You sort of done with what?
No, we're not quite finished.
Okay. Are we going to talk about like what the floor layouts of the Welcome Center are? Because I'll hold those if you're going to talk about those. If not, I'm going to ask a couple questions about them.
We've got the site plan. If the site plan
Yeah,
goes
let's.
back to the floor.
Right. We want to go over the site plan next, immediately
Well, I'll hold
around
it
the
to, if
building.
you're going to talk about the site.
I don't think we actually have detailed floor
we do.
plans. Do we?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to also build off of this
Okay.
question. Thank you, Ann. Oh, that was a good question, a good point, because there has been so much public concern about certain issues. And as you said, what I hear the most often, and I don't hear a lot in my community. I mean, people, if they say, oh, you're on that one of those commissions, right? And what are they doing at the city dock? You know, they're really not following it. They're not showing a high level of concern. That's not really relevant to our decision-making process, but I just throw it out there. But what I do hear from time to time is this thing about bulk and height and the way it relates to its environment. And I'd like to compliment you for the changes you've made. And when I look at the end of the current Prince George Street and look down the street, there are actually numerous buildings of approximately the same size. And there's a variation. It's not like there's a roof line or something, a cornice line that goes straight across. So I think this is de-emphasizing the visitor center in comparison to the Burris House, in comparison to your earlier proposals. And it's actually more in keeping with the scale and rhythm of the existing buildings that are most closely aligned with the Burris House. So, you know.
Well, thank you. I mean, I agree, and that's the goal. There was one other thing I was going to say about that, and there are other buildings that are taller.
Yeah.
Significantly taller, of course, on Dock Street here, a few doors down.
Oh, yes. And so the last thing I'd just say at this point before you go on, because you are going to address the interior design, is sometimes I wish that our commission, the HPC, had some more authority over the interior, but we really have none. I mean, you know, it's great to hear what you're going to do as a citizen, because that is of concern to all of us who are taxpayers. But anyway.
And I'd just qualify why I asked the question. And you kind of alluded to it. Feeds into what you were saying. My community is not saying a lot to me either, but sometimes the few have the loudest voices in the community, and some people are resistant to change. And I think if they saw where we are now compared to where we're going to be when it's finished, then they probably wouldn't have the same concerns or the same anxiety about change. I think it's a great plan. Some people talk about the view. Some people talk about the lack of parkings. We've addressed all of those issues. We've got the parking over at the parking garage. It's also subsidizing some of the costs of this. The Harbor Master building is not something that we should all be proud of at this stage. Like, there's a lot better ways to do that. And you've figured out a mixed use space that also allows for a lot of other things. So I agree. I think it's a great plan. I just think people need to actually lean into like what it could be rather than what they fear it would be.
Right.
So.
We can go forward, or you can address the site, the internal part now. Should we
Right.
finish up with the site plan and then go
is
back to this?
Travis, you online?
Yours are the next two on the waterfront.
Hey, everybody, how's my
Okay.
This is yours.
Right.
Okay, so Travis, we'll call you on you in just a minute or two. I just wanted to say to end on this, if we can bring the plan back up. We've got it on one screen, but not the other. But the idea of this water access, and I know we've talked about it a lot, but it is something that was very important to, it was probably the single most brought up comment that we heard was about water access and kayaks and this and that, and how much people will really use it, we'll see. But the idea is that it's available. And, we also heard, I'm sure some of the yachts may not want all this to happen, but, I think we've got to be able to allow that to happen. So there is that space that we have here adjacent to Burtis. This building, I think, is a very breathable indoor-outdoor building that is responding to the site and the needs that it has. So it has room for kayaks outside. It has room for accessibility and doors in various locations as we find a use for that ground floor of Burtis, for instance. But if you go to the next slide, Eileen, of the, just in terms of, and the thought that we have a space there with the park that Scott talked about where you really could do some environmental programming and educational types of things. The day we had the tent out there and we had our community meeting, we had a guy shucking oysters out there and actually steaming and smoking oysters. And, that space can be activated in a lot of different ways, which I think is all positive. But we're going to pull up the site plans here next for.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Off of the water access for everyone?
Yeah.
I tried for 2 years to get a kayak rack at the end of Prince George Street and was shut down by the harbor master, the irony of it. So
Right.
has that changed? Because it was a hard no. There will be no kayaks, there will be no paddle boards. It's very dangerous there. It's very busy traffic. So I love this, but has something happened that I'm not privy to?
Yeah, Bryce, I think
Yeah, you
that's
bet.
beyond the control of that group.
Okay, but I mean,
This is
all.
our plan, this is what we're proposing.
But that's a
We'll
big
have
part of
that-
what you're saying is water use.
It's
an argument
not
for a
anything
different
that
day.
Anybody at this table
Right.
can
It's
say
an
this is
argument for a
above
different
us.
Okay, so nothing we don't know.
There's nothing new there
Okay.
from my perspective.
A critical element of the city dock action, remember the second slide with all of these comments, I went through and I pulled out, and there were hundreds of them. I just put a couple on the slide, that we must provide water access. That is a driving force behind the city dock action plan. And there are, the harbor master may have one perspective, but we absolutely are committed to creating that space where people can get in the water. And the direction here is to have a variety of opportunities for boating, including kayaking. And that, there'll certainly have to be more discussions, but that is how it's being designed.
Who does that come under?
That water access?
The city.
Okay.
And I'd just like to add to that, and Bob, I need you to help me out here. We all remember sitting around that big room over at the Pitt Moyer Center, and how many people were talking about those things. You could hear it. It was one of those things that was
250.
But you could hear people talking about that topic because it was deemed so important by so many people. But I actually think I remember, Bob and I were on the Planning Commission simultaneously during the Cohen administration, and it was Mayor Cohen who asked for the creation of the first city dock renewal plan, at least in my time here in Annapolis. And people were talking about that then, that it was difficult to do anything other than bring your boat up, and have one of the slips or something. So am I remembering that correctly?
You're remembering correctly.
Yeah, well, I'm not that doddering yet.
It's a common basic instinct in humans is to
Absolutely.
touch the water.
Dip your toe in the water. And it's I find more than anything, because I live on the water, is that people want to sit on the edge of the bulkhead and sit. And if there's boats lined up that are all leased out, you don't really feel comfortable sitting there and staring at somebody's boat, So there'll be some other areas here where that can happen. And I think that's the good thing about it.
This is turning into public use, something which is essentially not the public use.
So is that just to follow up for your comments about, we'll figure that out. It's like the plan at least makes it accessible. Yes. And then now that it's accessible, let's figure that out. Where you're going to dock your kayak is not due respect, it's not an issue. You're not going to be able to have everybody's kayak down there at the end of Prince George Street. It's just like a launch. It's a place that you can access the water, because over the course, I've lived here for 40 years. Over the course of 40 years, the access to the water has gone from here to like here to like here to, that's what you guys were talking about in Pit Moyer. And now this is one other place where the city can say, no, actually, we're going to open that up so you can at least walk your own kayak down there and put it in the water. You're not going to be able to leave it there in a dock. If that's what you were asking, that's not a reasonable expectation. There's just too many people who would want to do that. But to be able to go down there and launch it and go out in the water right there in Annapolis. Sorry, that's.
But I think.
I take, because I lived on Prince George Street 2 different times in my life, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I'd love to be able to do that.
I think the takeaway, and you notice the theme through all of this is, why is this building on the waterfront? This building is on the waterfront for the harbor master, for safety, for management, but it is on the waterfront because that is the commitment that this board, the Planning Commission in particular, the Historic Preservation Commission in general, but it was the Planning Commission and the City Council have said, have committed, we are going to provide some waterfront access to all the people who don't live on the waterfront.
And really, as we define water access, this is a really key point. A big part of it is what Bryce described. The ability to relax and enjoy being at the water, and we're creating many of those spaces in both our parks, but also as part of the Welcome Center, its patio and its second floor. We're making all of that public, what in most places is a fairly exclusive privilege, and we're trying to make that something that everybody can enjoy.
All right, so I'll segue you back to this, just with the comment that I really like the way the building's situated between the building in latitude 38, the Prince George's Park, the way it goes down to the water. It's all fantastic. I really like the changes we've seen here.
Turn the building 90 degrees and make the 2 shed parts of unequal length. And the transparency of it, which is why that question about glass is so important. The transparency is like amazing. It's going to make the whole thing seem lighter instead of a heavy building on the, side
Yeah,
facade.
I think the circulation around all the buildings really good.
No.
So.
And it's an interesting thought that you threw out, that it's not an iconic building. This is more humble, more useful, but very nicely designed and more flexible to other internal uses. The materials list is really actually pretty interesting. Like you said, it's mostly wood, which is a way of making things, I don't know,
Lighter, less monolithic.
Yes, and right, we have enough brick, thank you.
And City Dock was always framed buildings.
That's right. Yeah. That's the other thing, is that the Burtis House is frame and everything that used to be, okay, I've said enough.
No, you haven't. I just want to observe time. I don't want to pay a $50 fine in the parking garage. And I only, It's 75 now? Oof. Okay. Oh, okay. And so I'd like to move things along. I always like that anyway. But the thing I wanted to really emphasize is we are taking public comment and questions from the public. And that's one of the reasons we have these meetings and open them in that respect. So I want to get along and if there's any comment, questions to get them.
We have just 2 slides because the Planning Commission will be in November seeing the site plan for all of this. So Travis Ligon is on virtually, and he would like to walk you through the site plan, and then we have just next steps, and then we're going to open it.
Great, thank you.
Travis?
Hey everyone. Yeah, thanks, Eileen. What slide are we on? I can see the video feed. Okay, now I see the presentation.
We're
Great.
on City Dock
so
Site Plan
we wanted
Phase
to
2.
provide a little bit of engineering site plan context to the discussion this evening. There's a major site development plan that's been submitted to the City of Annapolis that's we've gone through one complete round of comments and feedback with all the various reviewing departments within the city, and got a wonderful dialogue going, a lot of good feedback and answers to that feedback so far. So the next couple slides you'll see are excerpts from that site development plan package that'll be coming to planning and zoning for a public hearing approval in the near future. So this is the overall site plan. You can see the building fits in nicely. What's key here is obviously this is a key feature of the flood resilience project, and you'll notice that there's a wall very elegantly designed sort of into the landscape of this park that continues the flood protection line where the green shaded area on this plan was the previous site plan, and where that flood protection line leaves off, it continues through this area of the site in front of the new Maritime Welcome Center building, in front of Burtis, and then there's a couple passive barriers to project across the flat landscape of the park to get us across to the other side towards the top of the screen, working our way over and tying into a nicely coordinated tie-in point with the U.S. Naval Academy flood protection wall that they're building. Next slide, please. So this plan includes some additional utilities. You can see that there's a stormwater pump station, there's some drainage. You can see a little bit more of the materials and finish come into shape here. I heard a question earlier, I think, in some of the conversation about the removable bollards and fire department access. We had a great meeting with Bud Zapata and the fire marshal's office very recently. We talked about what kind of locks would be on those bollards and how they would operationally handle those. And this alleyway has a very neatly coordinated travel pathway for an ambulance. So great dialogue with their office so far. And next slide, please. Do we have another one of the site plans in the presentation?
I'm afraid, I think that's all we have, Travis.
We do.
Oh, we do, okay.
They're in the backup.
Keep going then.
They're in the backup.
Okay. Is it a separate file?
Travis, they were in the backup, but I think it's a separate file.
No worries. I think I can present from my side, and we can.
Yeah, there you go.
Works, but maybe why don't we see if there's any questions on the site plan thus far, and I can pull up additional sheets in detail as may be necessary to help answer those questions.
There's one other thing I wanted to mention on the site plan, and that is that the Maritime Welcome Center will not be parallel to to the Burtis house exactly. They're a little bit skew, which makes it a really historic building. So, but it is off a little bit that we found, and you'll start to see that here. It's not a lot, but.
And that was deliberate?
No, Burtis was lined up.
Yeah.
Just say it was.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was, well, Captain Burtis, I think, had a couple of cocktails when he was laying out the building. He got off the grid a little bit, but.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah.
The next slide, actually, not site plan, but it's sort of a, whatever view that you've created. I don't think it shows, it doesn't show well up on the screen. It shows not much better, but it really shows the context of this best.
Yes.
And it shows that the deck that you're talking about is really a significant deck, public deck. See how it fits in, and how making the one shed smaller makes so much more space available.
Yep.
And it's compact, it's pretty concentrated at much activity down.
Is this the part you're looking at, Bob?
I really like that view, because even though
Oh, good.
it's a helicopter view, but it does help to explain the building. And I feel like, it's responding to everything that's around it. And, we got a lot of good feedback from Michael Dowling and the other architects, Craig Martin and others, who were very passionate about how we, move these different shed roofs and create something that was atypical, certainly not symmetrical.
Yeah.
And this is the part, Bob, that you're looking at, right?
Yeah, no, it's really, it shows it to me.
Is that entirely computer-generated image?
Yeah, I mean, we draw it.
That's what I mean. I don't mean the AI generate.
Yeah, that's right.
It really more or less
gun
looks
shy
like an
about
extension
AIs.
of those other buildings coming down. It just, it's
exactly.
very,
That's a
it's
tremendous
very
Turning
congruous is the term that I might.
Sometimes, you get some great ideas when these things happen, and I didn't necessarily see that one coming, but I think it's much better.
It is.
And I'm not too proud to say it. So.
All right, Mr. Tower, did we get anything on paper?
So while we're doing that,
Want
can I
to go
ask a
back to
question?
your question?
So I'll ask just a question about the inside of the Welcome Center. So I'm presuming there's a basement still?
Right.
And that's going to have the restroom. Do you think about the cost of the basement? I'm still really having trouble with that.
Yeah.
It's like your phone.
So,
2 fingers.
Well, let me just
Now you have to show me how to do it.
respond to that while we're fielding this other question. Yeah, I'm not so concerned about building in the basement. We build dry basements all the time. I mean, here the first 5 feet, we're already going to be out of the ground above where the asphalt, right?
Yeah.
Which helps a little bit.
I'm really, what I'm worried about is long-term maintenance costs of that building. If you've got to always worry about, and I know I asked you this question at a prior one, does this keep you up at night? And just the long-term maintenance costs of something that's going to have a lot of pressure on it for water ingress. Yeah, I mean, you can do anything, but at what cost? So and so what I was curious about is what's the rest of the layout and how is the rest of the building being utilized? So given the space that you have now, I think we've all, gushed over it enough from an exterior view.
Right.
Given the space they have now, if you were to not have a below grade facility, could you make that work? And what isn't?
We would need a lot more area.
What wouldn't be there?
The building would get bigger. We would probably have to fill in the area under the deck, get rid of the deck.
What would you have to give up? And I don't want to make a presumption about what's in the rest of the building without seeing.
Alex, in the redesigns, the entire second floor, the entire floor is now Harbor Master. As it's been redesigned, that's 100%
That's why I wanted to see this.
Yeah.
because I want to speak on something I've seen, not something that I
Right.
sort of saw before, and it may be different now. That's
So
why I asked.
that has changed. There were a variety of things now, the entire design, and it's,
So I wish you had brought that, because to me.
this is the design for the second floor. And what you see is where,
That's the ground floor, actually.
is that the ground?
Yeah, that's the ground floor.
So the ground floor, we have Visit Annapolis, they have a kiosk here. We have boater facilities. We also have public bathrooms, and then the lower level are public bathrooms as well as boater facilities. The second floor is 100% Harbor Master. Before, it had been a couple of conference rooms. The one conference room, the citywide conference room, has been converted into Harbor Master space. It could conceivably be used as a conference room, but will have all of the Harbor Master desks and screens in it. So the second floor is 100%. You may want to talk to the other two floors.
Yeah, and on this floor, let's see, let me just borrow your mouse. So on this ground floor, this is Visit Annapolis. And that's going to be a big part of this space. There'll be some exhibits, some obviously some activation of that space that they will provide. Then, of course, you get one large staircase here. We've got some storage and a space where, we may be able to store chairs and that type of thing for this lower deck area. And then the Harbor Master has a reception area, really here. When people walk in, they have to go up the elevator and to that second level, which is all Harbor Master, as Eileen said. Down below, you'll come in and take the elevator down or the stair, and then it's all toilet spaces for public toilets, and then also shower facilities and boater facilities on the side closest to the water. I don't have that plan. Travis could pull it up, but we understood you guys to be more focused on the exterior, so we didn't put it in this deck.
But I guess to get to your original question, we have looked at it, and I've been in numerous meetings, as has Burr, and there is not any excess future space. I think initially the thought was this was something for the future, for growth. Right now, with the changes and the reductions in the overall square footage, there is not future growth. It is something that meets the needs of the needs of today, including what will be an ability, if there's a ferry, for people to get tickets, and we have Visit Annapolis here if you have questions for them.
Yeah, I guess what I was reacting to is that, in prior versions and discussions we've had, and these are my words, but it came off as a lot of this was essentially an event space. And that's my words. I think that's something that's not really appropriate for this building. I think what's appropriate for this building is the Harbor Master function, visitor center function, the boater stuff, all the stuff you talked about. And I guess I'm sort of asking you to convince me that all of this, basically all of the space is taken up by necessary functions and not, essentially like, the city could lease this out as an event space. That's
one of the things
what I got from some of the prior discussions.
Yes, one of the things that we had to do, which you will receive in November, is this is a water-dependent use. And as a water-dependent use, in redesigning it, almost the entire space is for the Harbor Master, with the exception of the small space that Visit Annapolis gets. So that was part of the redesign.
Okay. Anybody else?
In this last picture here, is this the most recent I'm just,
I had to extend my
I'm
parking,
liking the
so-
relationship of the roof to the new welcome center, but is this how it will look? Is this the glass roof?
Yeah, can we, let's go,
Yeah,
yeah.
or was there a different iteration? What is that?
Let me just pull it up on here to,
Isn't that the pavilion?
yes,
Yeah, that's right.
it is,
And then this is the other pavilion where the current welcome center is?
right.
Excuse me, Eileen. I'm going to have to excuse myself. I didn't realize it was a $75 fine, and I have about 5 minutes left. I did review the questions, and I hope that John perhaps will gather these up. And, yeah.
Well, I can validate you over here.
Oh. Well, wait, it said I couldn't. It said that I could not with the same, you can override that?
Certainly can do it.
Those with the gold make the rules.
Okay, very good, thank you.
We can get your,
I just extended mine.
we can get your parking taken care of.
Oh, okay.
think I just-
Thank you, thank you.
So, can I just finish my point? The new pergola, the additional one, if there's any way that could have a bathroom, because there are current bathrooms there. I do hear a lot of feedback from the community that this is far to go to a bathroom.
So Mary, let me make sure I'm following what you're talking about. You're talking about the electrical utility pergola and the
Where
desire
the current
to have,
harbor master is, that currently has bathrooms. I'm just saying that this is very far for people to go to a bathroom. And there's lots of people that don't want to go in a basement with little kids. So I'm just saying if we have this new other pergola where the electric equipment will be, is there any possibility to have even one bathroom there?
On the, you know, obviously the market building has toilets, but on the ground level of the Maritime Welcome Center, there are 2 toilets that face out towards that alley space, if you will. I know it's only 2.
Like an exterior?
Yeah, they're exterior facing. And then, you know, the larger toilets are all down below.
Yeah.
That would be used for boat
I just
shipping.
want to say, of all the things that people ask for, toilets closer to Craig Street is the biggest, is the biggest ask.
Thank you, Bert.
For the elderly, for the impaired,
Thanks.
for everyone,
Right.
for people, kids, it's a big thing.
Right.
yeah.
I can understand that. I
Contacts.
Yeah, I understand that, and that is a comment I've heard.
and the answer to the
The site plan
question,
was already approved.
the answer to the question,
It's okay.
There's
Okay,
bathrooms there now, right? So the function of a bathroom
Right.
is already there.
right.
Just one bathroom.
the answer to the question is that a bathroom could certainly be added. It, A, would require an amendment to the site plan, but B, the building that was the pergola that the Historic District Commission approved last week, it would enlarge in that building, and I want to say it enlarged it by,
Well, it does enlarge it a fair amount, which none of us want to see, but beyond that, Scott, was there anything else about?
We do have some necessary evils.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's a little bit bigger and people get the bathroom.
Yeah, but it's a bathroom. It's a highly
Right.
useful item.
I think it's a very reasonable requirement. So,
significant enlargements. Scott, do you remember this?
well, it'll add, you know, 6 by 7, 45 square feet times 2, about 90 square feet or something like that, but, you know, it is what it is.
So you could see doing
It's 2
it.
bathrooms.
Shade, the ability to go under it for shade is going to be, would be bathrooms then. You would lose that.
Yeah.
But, you
It would
know,
make a lot of people happy.
I think we need to study it.
yeah.
Okay, I don't think that you need to come back before the planning commission, by the way, if you make that change. I would not call that a major change.
No, would you, John?
I think you need it. No, I
Yeah.
don't know.
I don't
Yeah,
think it would be a major change, so that if you decide to do it,
Okay.
okay.
I'm really reluctant to do this, but I usually don't do it. But every time I go into the Market House, you know, there's 2 bathrooms there.
Yeah. we were saying the same.
There's a small space that I never see in use. I don't see merchants there, although there's merchandise. I don't see customers there. And it's adjacent to that hallway that the bathrooms are on. You could put 2 bathrooms in there if that still, met the requirements of the lease and the merchants and all of that, and we should go there.
Scott and Bryce can do that in their sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would help us without having
Dear
to
Dad, please send money.
Especially in my sleep.
We know that we're exceeding our jurisdiction.
It's really a question for Burke.
Now,
and John.
one of the things to be made.
not fixing your parking ticket.
Nicer facilities at the Market House would go a long way to fixing that.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I know, it's a different
All
discussion.
right,
Yeah,
we
it's all-
have
that's
1,
why I
2,
didn't
3,
wanna
4,
do it.
5 questions. The first question is, can the slide presentation be made available to the public as a document? And the answer to that question is yes. It will be put on Access Annapolis,
Correct.
because that's in the city's website.
Yes, that's the city's website.
Okay, and there's a lot of information on those slides. Why and how is a building at the water's edge with a subgrade level, how is that resilient? So, you can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, there is nothing inherent in a subgrade basement that's not resilient. It has to be dry-proofed. It has to be constructed. Most of City Dock is all fill. Quite frankly, now, that's how it was created, of course. So it has to be structured in a way to deal with that fill, but there's nothing in regards to that basement that make it more or less resilient.
And
The resiliency has to come from creating barriers. And the other part of resiliency that we all like to see is marshy land that can absorb water and, green space. We just don't have much room for that on the edge of this working dock, Susan Campbell Park will be floodable. And, that's for a number of reasons, but I don't see any reason why that makes it any more or less resilient.
it's also built up 6 feet above whatever we call sea level, right? High tide. Right, and so it's behind the whole flood barrier. Okay, so it's not actually at the water's edge, it's inland and it's up.
Right.
However, 5 or 6 feet. Okay. Question answered? Okay. This is another one of those hardware, software questions, which we answered, frankly. What will the hours be for the bathrooms, and what about other publicly accessible parts? And I don't think that architects can answer that question.
Nor do we have any
That's a
authority
city
over it.
policy.
Nor do we have
issue.
any authority, and it's just something that's gonna have to be, over time, a lot of stuff needs to get worked out. Like, how much freedom are people gonna have to sell or not sell things, along the promenades? Will kiosk, will guys with, be able to play music? All of the kinds of things that go with public spaces are all gonna have to be worked out, none of which are architectural issues. This is sort of a repetitive question. What additional flood protections will the MWC require? Does it need a coffer dam? I'm not even quite sure what a coffer dam is, but I think we answered the question about raising, the whole thing is raised, and the whole foot of Prince George Street is raised, and that's the flood barrier.
I think he has that.
It's answered for you? You wrote it? All right. That's what counts.
Yeah, and we're behind the flood barrier with the building.
Exactly, and it's sort of part of it in a sense. Do we have any draft designs of the MWC with a smaller footprint? Well, we just asked that question and went over that in terms of what the internal needs are and functions are going to be. And about whether, if you lose the basement, what happens to the other 2 floors, okay? And the basement is not really a basement. Half of it is already above ground, right, above the grade level? Something like that.
40% of it, yeah.
40% of it,
So just to be clear on that one, we kind of started with the needs and then decided around. There was never a visualization with smaller square footage.
Well,
I shared two, or at least one earlier that was just a smaller building. But, you know, this is a once in a generation opportunity to build what we need here. And, you know, so we're not trying to push it back. We've got a lot of demands for things to put in it. So, you know, we haven't really seen the need to necessarily make it smaller because we want to accommodate the desires that people have at the water's edge. Being the one time you're going to get to do it, because, you know, try and build another building on that park, you know.
I just want to clarify, it's not necessarily saying you did it, but I think it's, hopefully we need it to be smaller, but I think it's helpful to explain to people, if it were going to be smaller, here's what we would lose out.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Thanks so much. So real quick, what's the height of the flood barrier that we're looking at?
It's,
Flood protection, let me handle it.
go ahead.
Sure.
The flood protection level is 8
From high tide.
Sea level.
from NAV 88. That's a national North American vertical datum set in 1988, which would be 8.77 mean low water, which is what when we think about the tidal gauge that we got to get on the weather reports, it's MLLW. So we're protecting everything to elevation 8.77.
And that's the city's now floodplain management set height, correct?
No, that is the design target for this project.
But it's, I believe I recall the minimum is 7 feet right now for the FEMA flood map in that location.
Where you can build your first floor elevation is 7.
7, right? Plus we have
And
1 foot freeboard.
then you need another foot of freeboard for your electrical conductors.
Okay. So we have that. Just one thing of concern is that we're projecting for sea level rise between 2030 to 2050, another 11 inches. So be cognizant of the fact that to make it really resilient for the future, that you're going to have an additional 11 inches of sea level rise between 2030 to 2050.
Right. And so going all the way back to, let's say, 5-6 years ago, the reason 8 was picked was essentially the 100-year floodplain in the year 2060, accounting for sea level rise.
Great, thanks.
And also, I believe, and this is a question to Burr, that in the future, there is some capacity, if needed to be, to build on top of that.
I do think you have to do it everywhere, right? You leave one little gap somewhere and the water's coming through that gap, floods everything. So there will be places where that will be easy and there will be places where that will be hard.
This is great. I'm always kind of coming back out here. You initially started saying that 94.1% of the project is funded. What's the thoughts about the additional 5.96% of funding for the project? These are the questions that people ask me all the time. The funding's going to get out of control. People assume things that are not necessarily going to happen. The anxiety takes over. So if I'm going to help people understand, like, the funding as we know it today, which is 94% of the project, where would the other 6% come?
I'll take that one as well. The Resilience Finance Authority of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County was stood up for the sole purpose, or largely stood up around the concept of providing additional funding for this project. To this date, that number is 0. So we'll be going into this budget cycle looking at the options to finance, working with those folks and the county to close that budget gap. Of course, it was also when the city did the Hillman Garage deal, it was thought at that time that additional Annapolis funding would likely be needed, somewhere in that $5 or $10 million range. So we've got a lot to do on the administration side to close that budget gap. But we've come a long way from where we were a couple of years ago, where we really didn't have a solid grasp of how we would pay for everything.
And I would just add that the revenue from the garage has exceeded expectations, or projections, I should say.
Fines.
I want to make a comment about the funding, and
And that's really not something that our commission has any purview or authority to control. So I am now speaking as a private citizen or taxpayer. Anytime you undertake a project of this magnitude in comparison to the size and resources of the community, I think if you consider our experience, all of us have the experience of any kind of project, whether it's private or public or a partnership, they most often exceed the original budget. And if we were to say, as I think some of the people, very legitimate question, but as I think what's motivating many people to ask that is they don't want to do it if there's a risk. Well, you never make an improvement, you never grow, you never change. So I, as a taxpayer, am willing to take a risk, although I might not be around to pay for it, but yes, the bill comes to it. But anyway, my son and grandchildren will, and my daughter, so let them. They're not residents of the city, they're on the tax. Anything else? Anything else?
Is there a time frame that's for the resiliency part, or for this part, or for the park part? I don't feel like anyone really knows.
What's the timeline at this point?
Dynamic.
What?
Dynamic.
But we've missed this yearly cycle.
I understand time is a relative concept.
But no, really, it's complicated. We really don't have a firm time to start because we are waiting for a federal grant. The federal government has to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. Different agencies take different approaches to that one. The agency we're working with is meticulous.
Right, but in general, you've got cycle of the boat shows, which sort of is a yearly rhythm
Yes.
that you sort of.
Yes, so, and in the entire design process, as we've really fleshed out all of the details of the electrical infrastructure and what it will take, we've come to the conclusion it is not prudent. We would be taking on too much risk to try to build the entire project to include the primary and secondary electrical distribution within an 11-month period. So we are working really hard to come up with a plan to get a jump start on the electrical distribution this upcoming year in 2025, and then build the park between the 2025 and 2026 boat shows. And that's when we'll see significant improvements in the resilience.
But with that said, if I could just add, there is expectation for after the boat show this year for there to be some preliminary site plan work, and then, as Burgess said, in the spring of this coming year of 2025, you'll see electrical, and then after the boat show, I think is when.
Right, I mean, we have to get through permits. We still need a number of permits.
None of that's gonna get started until you hear from FEMA, right? I mean, you're not gonna start doing anything until you get confirmation.
Until we get FEMA's approval. So if we're going to do work that is unrelated to the scope of their grant, we're going to coordinate with that with them. And certainly there are aspects of this project that are not part of resilience. And so we feel like we have the ability to take that on, and we have kind of an informal early head nod from FEMA on that. But these are things you don't just jump out and do and figure out what happens afterwards. So we're working on that with them closely. But the other piece of the when will we start is we've got to get through some permits. So there's building permits, demolition permits.
Maybe
et cetera, et cetera.
a better way to phrase it is, what's your sort of drop dead date for this yearly cycle, that if you don't have whatever pieces to a certain level, that you say, we can't complete it in this year, we have to
delay
it another year? I mean, like.
We're not going to have this park built by September of 2025. So the next cycle is, I'm just going to give a complete answer.
You're talking about like doing some electrical work in this next year.
Yes.
But at some point, I mean,
July.
Oh, okay.
I'll give you a month, July.
All right, so like if you get to July and there's still too many uncertainties, you'll say, okay, we gotta wait for a year and then,
It could push another year. But when we hit these obstacles, we get a bunch of really smart people together, particularly Travis, and they figure out, oh, we can work around that. Somebody throws him a curveball, he figures a way around it. And so it's just it just feels premature to get into too much schedule detail, because what we've learned is things change and we adapt and adjust.
my favorite quote, plans are nothing, planning is everything.
Bingo.
I have one final question. Looking even further ahead, the triangular lot in front of Mission Barbecue or Stevens Hardware.
Oh, this again.
Ultimately, that's going to become a part of this park situation. Are we making sure that you're going to put the infrastructure there so that in the middle you can create a sort of a cafe plaza?
That is still our plan, yeah.
What condition was that, Bob?
Right. I think it was in, that's right, it was in the approvals.
Yeah.
Could you put a kiosk there? It might be a small kiosk to tell people the big information center for visitors is over here.
I'm going to show you an information kiosk. I mean, I can tell you right now.
Well, I want to hit the open.
I don't know if you're pulling my leg or not. Is this a serious question? Because you already approved the site plan for that area, so.
You can change the site plan.
Right.
We
It's
could.
not part of it now. All right, if there's nothing else, we're all satisfied? We're all satisfied? Okay. I don't think we even need a formal motion.
No, it's a work session.
We're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When is it going to be done? Yeah. That's